I want to talk about HIIT versus LISS cardio, right? Because we know there's going to be, some folks out there listening to this and say, hey, shouldn't bodybuilders be doing HIIT, because it's more akin to their weight training and things like that. And what I kind of want to just kick that conversation off with is deep in prep. What I have noticed oftentimes is I feel like I'm dieting the most when I am doing like 20 minutes of LISS versus 10 minutes of HIIT. I have no evidence for this. I have very little knowledge about this, except for just how I have felt. If I do 10 minutes of HIIT, or somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes of HIIT, it doesn't give me the same feeling like I'm dieting. You know what I mean? Whereas if I go do like 20 minutes of LISS, arguably I'm not burning as many calories, because what do they call that? The post-exercise oxygen consumption or whatever, right? But boy, I sure feel like I am dieted when I do LISS for 20 minutes versus HIIT, for 5 or 10 minutes. I feel like I get that kind of, how you feel when you're like your blood sugar's low and there's that lethargy and you're sweating a little bit.
Like your baseline feel, or while you're doing it?
Yeah, but baseline, yeah, like baseline. Throughout, kind of the day, So anyway, maybe you guys have thoughts on that, reasons, whatever. But, do we even think about that anymore as far as programming HIIT versus LISS or what have you?
I'm going to let the young guy go.
That's another perk of being the older guy. You don't get to go first if you want to, but you get to tell everybody what.
Yeah. I honestly, the only time I program HIIT is if we have severe time constraints and we need to move the needle on the expenditure side. I don't.
What do you mean time constraints? As in, like you're running out of time to get for the
let's say somebody they're training 3-4 days a week, they're already kind of busy. It's like, okay, that's increase, go to 12K steps. They're like, what hour are you expecting me to come up with for this? Then I might do something like HIIT, but that's pretty rare, to be honest, for me. I guess it's interesting you say that, Brad, because I've kind of had the opposite experience, but there's also been some confounding variables there where I was also dieting more aggressively when I was doing HIIT. So I can't say that it was the HIIT necessarily, but I know I at the time I was doing sprints on the track, which was actually pretty fun.
Yeah, I've done that.
But by the end of prep, it's like you get 10 yards down the track, you're just there's nothing in the tank. You're just kind of stumbling. But with I don't know what new research has really come out on HIIT recently, but it does seem, as far as I know, the consensus still sort of seems to be, if try to keep it low impact to like minimize interference effect with resistance training. So like a bike or an elliptical versus sprinting, like anything that has like a braking element to it or like an eccentric element to a large degree is, that can cause more muscle damage, which can interfere more with resistance training. But, the prep where I just tracked steps was probably the easiest prep I've had. But I also was dieting on more calories than I had before. So it's hard to, it's a dangerous game to play when you can, when people try to isolate it to one variable when there's other things. Cause
you can say, well, if you were eating the same amount of food and you were doing HIIT, maybe you would have recovered better from it.
Exactly.
Maybe if you program your training a little bit differently, maybe you can blend it all in together successfully.
Yeah, for sure. So, but if I do program HIIT, it's usually like I have an athlete right now doing HIIT it's largely out of preference. She just really enjoys doing HIIT. But it's not like my go-to tool. It probably would have been in like 2010 if I, and a lot of prep coaches. I remember
that was a
watching
thing
Layton Norton push his sedan down the street.
Yeah.
So, doing car pushes and everything. And I don't know many people that are still doing that. But I think they can both be very effective. But the cardio doesn't have to be it shouldn't be a training, like it shouldn't feel like resistance training, in my opinion. Like we use the weight training to build and maintain muscle. The cardio just chips away at expenditure. That's how I view it.
I don't prescribe HIIT just because I don't think it's necessary for a contest prep.
I don't think it is.
It's either. Like if you have someone who's weight training 4, 5, 6 times a week, I mean, that's pretty demanding in itself. I know, even like when I first started coaching and you know, I seen Brad do all these crazy HIIT things and, you know, Eric was doing them. I was like, why are they doing these? Like, I don't care what the science is pointing to. I'm like, this common sense is telling me this is hard. Like, I'm already weight training hard enough. Why do I want to do more hard stuff on top of this?
Yeah. Maybe bodybuilding's not for me.
So I was happy just getting on my recumbent, which I still have, by the way. Yeah. It's over there in the corner. I'll get on there and I'll watch a movie or I'll do whatever and just get some expenditure that way. Because the goal is fat loss. And I'm like, okay, I'm getting enough conditioning with my weight training. So that was just my perspective on it. And not to be a fear monger, but I had an athlete in that era and I didn't prescribe HIIT. It was more just like, hey, I just want you to do some LISS for all the reasons I just said. And he went ahead and did it anyway. And it was sprints. He ended up tearing a quad. So,
really?
Yeah, he tore a quad and then basically he was done. So prep was over. So he never finished. He never crossed the finish line. So it's, you know, if you're not used to doing something like that, it's like if you do end up doing HIIT, it's like, well, start slow and let's taper that in. Don't just go like a bat out of hell. But I mean, back then it seemed like it was really glorified though. Like watching you, Brad, like going at it. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Like he's hardcore.
I cringe at it today though, because knowing what I know now, you know, compared to what I knew back then and what I did back then, it's kind of, I don't know, I kind of cringe at it a little bit.
I mean, look at it this way. Some work ethic. I mean, you know what hard work feels like. I think that shouldn't be understated. I think that's...
Yeah. But at the time, I mean, I had zero evidence about it. I just, in my brain, I was thinking to myself, weight training is HIIT-ish. You're pushing hard for 12 reps, 15 reps, whatever. Your heart rate's jacked, you know, and then you rest for 2. And then you just rinse and repeat just over and over and over again as you're going through your session. So I was like, well, I'm going to pattern my cardio to be similar. I think it'll make more sense to make it all, I'll be anabolic, you know, kind of a component to my weight training, you know. That was the sense that I made of it at the time. But I'm pretty sure that's probably been, you know, debunked now over the course of a decade since we did that.
If you guys told me, Jeff, I want you to do HIIT twice a week and like each session you're going to burn about 300 calories, I'm like, I think I'm going to eat 1,500 calories that day instead.
and go ahead, Jeff. You go first.
That's all I got to say. It's like I'm still going to get my deficit, but I'm not going to go because the recovery factor after doing that, it's going to be more challenging. Even if my calories are at 15, I'm probably not going to be as zapped. So the next day, if I do have a training session, like, hey, okay, I'm recovered. I can get a good weight training session in here. But if I'm fatigued from doing like some high intensity cardio and my legs have nothing in them, I'm like, okay, what's my training going to look like?
Yeah, and that's exactly usually my rebuttal to my athletes, that they are rare, you know, because HIIT is becoming kind of more and more rare in the use of bodybuilding prep, right? I'm like, you know what? 2 things. Number 1, what do you want to be better? Do you want your cardio to be better, or do you want your weight training to be better? Because the cardio that you're talking about with this HIIT is going to affect your weight training in the next couple of days, being in a deficit and being fatigued, you know, from doing that cardio. I would rather you just eat less food, you know, than to have you do that and then get better weight training session from that. And then number 2, Jeff, just circling back to, you know, you don't want to be a fear monger, and I don't want to be either, but you still have to have an awareness that things like sprints, I mean, you're in a very vulnerable position when you're talking, your muscles are elongated to the max, right? And then you're forcefully contracting them the other direction in like a sprint, right? I mean, we see it all the time in team sports.
At 8 or 9% body fat or 10%.
Exactly. And you're not fueled.
Yeah.
You have to be aware of the precarious position that your muscles, your tendons, your body is in when you're in that state, and on top of it, you're not used to it. And just to give an old man's cautionary tale, 40 years old, I went out, part of a prep, and I wanted to play on this gridiron football team, right? And we were out there, and I'm one of the faster guys out there, and I'm showing off, trying to sprint, and chase these balls down and et cetera. And I strained my groin, and that groin bothered me for like months. That same spot bothers me to this day, 12 years later. And I hear this from athletes all the time. They pulled this hamstring in track when they were 38 years old, and now they're like 48 years old, and they still feel it to this day, So just, I, like you, Jeff, I don't want to fearmonger, but I think that a certain amount of awareness of what the repercussions of these things might be if you carelessly and start doing these, these techniques all for bodybuilding purposes, right? When, like we talked about at the very beginning of this call, is cardio really even needed to get to uber levels of low body fat and bodybuilding condition?
I think sprints sort of stand alone there in terms of, well, not completely alone, but they're by far more risky than like a recumbent bike.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, anything where you're reaching very long muscle lengths and having a forceful concentric like that, you may be playing with fire there a little bit in those stages.
How do you make that sound so much better than when I was trying to describe that, right?
No, I got what you were saying. I just didn't want so
much better.
I didn't want people to think like HIIT, like all forms of HIIT are created equal, because they're definitely not.
Yeah, but you definitely eloquently put what I was trying to convey.
But yeah, I'm not a huge advocate of using it unless it's just a time thing where it's like, okay, we just need to, you've got 15 minutes, we need to increase your deficit.
Time thing, and you just can't
Which
talk
honestly,
them out of it.
I can't even remember the last time that's happening, to be honest.
I can't remember the last time I signed HIIT.
A small handful of times.
Yeah.
I said earlier, I was like, well, did I assign this person a HIIT session, or did I just drop their calories today?
Yeah.
And it's
maybe I've just thought about it. Just ended up pulling calories anyway.
And I feel like a lot of our athletes that we work with they're kind of on that level, and we will tell them, I think it would serve us better to just reduce calories here. And they're on board. They're usually like, yeah, that sounds a whole lot better than getting another 5,000 steps a day, or that sounds a whole lot better than adding another hour of cardio every week,
Yeah. What are sort of like, what is kind of the decision-making process there for us? Like if I know someone is starting to get really run down and just smoked, like cinder block for feet kind of feeling, we've experienced in prep, I'm more inclined to pull back on calories than add additional cardio. And one of the telltale signs for me, like, is just the way they communicate. I think it's helpful having videos every now and then, or voice memos sometimes. If I suspect someone's kind of running on fumes, and I had an athlete a few years ago who, like, his voice memos as prep went on, it's like
you can hear the tone.
His spoken words per minute just dramatically dropped off.
Yeah,
it's just like a sigh, and then just like stumbles out a few words. It's like, all right, look,
or the check-ins get a lot shorter. Maybe their average of 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they're like 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So I think that's,
Also, too, I think we're experienced coaches. We've been through prep many times ourselves. We've prepped so many athletes, so we know more or less like the phase of prep someone's in. We kind of expect, okay, at this stint of a prep, chances are fatigue levels are going to go up. They're going to start escalating. So sometimes we can be inquisitive too. How are you actually feeling? Are you starting to feel run down? Because the way I see prep coaching, it's like a lot of it's just fatigue management.
There really is.
It really is. Yeah.
Fatigue management, and basically making sure people's emotions while going through the prep are as even keeled as possible.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's part of bodybuilding, is we got to hold on to the muscle. You know, we got to have muscle when we're on stage. And if we're just burning it all off through cardio and low calories, it kind of defeats the purpose and what it is that we're trying to accomplish with the sport.